welcome to spring break that's right around the corner. So really appreciate everyone joining this morning. We have several guests with us, so thank you certainly for that. As I mentioned, Dr. Clarita will not be able to join this morning, but we do have a quorum with Tiffany Rudd, Jennifer Clark, and myself. So again, welcome everyone to the meeting. Melissa, you good with the roll call? Do you need to make any identifications, or are we good to go with that?
We're good to go. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. We'll move into the public comment section. Obviously, we always welcome feedback from anyone on the call. If you'd like to make a comment, just please state your name, your affiliation to the school, and then you have 3 minutes to speak. So we'll open it up to public comment. Anyone for public comment at this time? Okay, great. We'll move into discussion items. We have the lone discussion item of the next phase learning model for middle school, and we'll kick it over to Principal Hauer for the to update us on the principal report. Doug, please.
Absolutely. Melissa, can you? I know you've got it. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. So it has been a very interesting week here in North Carolina with just a lot of happening. So I wanted to keep the board at least aware of some of those changes. So on March 23rd, Governor Cooper allowed for House Bill 324 to be placed on the calendar for the House to look at. Essentially, if we really just boil it down to its essence, House Bill 324 allows for charter schools to include all grade levels in Plan A operation. And that was one of the key points of distinction that previous legislation did not allow for, that they specifically did not include charters and then didn't allow for that to be considered. So I actually included the bill itself, which is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but there's very little information there that is not what I just said. However, there's a few key stipulations from within this that are outlined. So, 1, 2, and 3. So we would have to notify the department, DHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, to make them aware. It would, before beginning in Plan A, we would need to partner with the ABC Science Collaborative, and that is out of Duke University. And then engage in robust contact tracing, and then provide that information to the ABC Collaborative. It would be my assumption that information would then be compiled for all schools that were going to move forward and then help potentially guide some decision making as we enter into the summer and obviously thinking slightly further down the road into next school year. So moving right along, the bill itself was pretty straightforward. The bill does, however, note that, the Strong Schools Public NC Public Health Toolkit, which is a document that I actually had provided in previous principals report, and I've included the link as well for any that would prefer to peruse the entire document. But essentially, the next chart is the key component for us in terms of operation. So previously, Plan A had been specifically stated that it was going to be for grades K through 5, and Plan B, or hybrid operation, would be for grades 6 through 12, and those were the only avenues open. Then legislation came out that allowed for Plan A operation for traditional public schools, not charters, and now it has been generalized and broadened to allow for all public school units, including charter schools, to assess that as an option. The other thing I would say is certainly not a mandate that middle schools grades 6 through 12 are mandated to move forward in-person operation. In hybrid model of operation is in fact an in-person model of operation. The language has changed slightly to say to the greatest extent possible. The key distinction, though, between Plan A and Plan B, and really there's one pronounced distinction, and probably only one, is the distancing requirement. requirement between students. And so within Plan B operation, the mandate is still there to try to maintain 6 feet of distancing between students. Within Plan A operation, it would allow for a full density of classroom. And clearly that limits the potential for, maintaining that. You could never maintain 6 feet social distancing. And frankly, within the classroom, essentially for those parents who have, or people who have been in schools when there were EOG testing going on, you simply try to space out the desks as much as possible and maximize the use of the room. Rule of thumb is to always try to get as much space between students as you possibly can. But there is no 6 foot distancing requirement. All of the other requirements, cloth face covering, certainly protecting vulnerable populations, all of the other things that have been outlined would still continue in either A or B model of operation. So thank you, Melissa. And then I think one of the key things that everybody needs to keep in mind as well is parents will always be given the option of choosing whatever model of operation in person the school is offering, or they always retain, at least for the remainder of this year, the possibility of maintaining fully remote operation as well. So parents have that choice through the remainder of this year. Clearly don't have optics on what that will mean for school operation next year. And I'm not sure that will or will not be extended, but I do know for the next, roughly 8 weeks, that will be offered, and then we'll kind of work out the future when we can work out the future. So essentially, just to boil this down to its essence, and let me jump back. Late breaking email that I kind of received last night that is not outlined in this is the State Board of Education did in fact ratify all of this. So it was proposed by Governor Cooper. It has gone through the legislative process, and the State Board of Education has in fact ratified this to allow this information to be applied to charter schools. So it would look like, in my assessment of this, that this would be an avenue that Greensboro Academy could explore. So we can obviously make a decision to return in whatever model of operation that we would like. Certainly considerations if we were going to look at this as a viable model of operation and think about our 6th through 8th grade in terms of increasing that density. Certainly we would want to make our instructors aware of that so that they could, make necessary adjustments within the classroom, primarily seating, but we might have to remove some items and all of those great things. Certainly specials and PE and all of those kind of things. We're going to need to, we would need to adjust practice in order to, try to maximize distance and safety for the students. So configuring space, removal of items, all of those kind of things would be key. And then Greensboro Academy would need to submit a plan or at least consult with the HHS and receive their guidance. We would need to partner with the ABC Science Consortium, or collaborative rather, and then maintain our existing model of contact tracing, applying that information to them. We don't really have optics on what that looks like and how that would be provided, meaning, we just don't know if it would just be numbers of students impacted or the detail that they would want from within that. I simply don't have the answer to that. I don't know that any of us do. Now, what I would say is a couple of considerations as well. From a school operational standpoint, within the kindergarten through 5th grade Plan A operations, it's gone relatively well. Which is not to say that there haven't been, challenges and situations that we've had to face. I would say that those have become less frequent than perhaps they were in some of our early, even, Plan B hybrid model of operation. I do believe that some of that might be due to some concurrent reduction in the overall rates of COVID-19 within our Guilford County, within our community at large. I tend to be one that looks at the daily rates per 100,000 as kind of my guiding, feel for how things are going within our community, and obviously there's different ways to slice and dice that. But that being said, our rates are currently, as of yesterday, and I haven't looked this morning yet, but are about 18 new cases per 100,000 in Guilford County. So to put that into context, at at the point in time where we were debating or looking at the options, assessing our options, if you will, of coming back in Plan A operation or entering into hybrid, North Carolina, Guilford County specifically, numbers had peaked at about 75 new cases per day per 100,000. So 18 is a significant reduction to that number, and seems to be maintaining. We've been hovering between, say, 15 and 18 for the last several days. So school operation has been relatively good. There have been some hiccups, but we've been able to maintain function without having to close down classrooms or grade levels for the most part, and that's been a welcome addition. There have been opportunities where we have had to make some classroom-related, adjustments in terms of operation, but that was quite some time ago. I would also say that in North Carolina has been very strong in their efforts to prioritize vaccination for school staff members. And at this point, the vast majority of the staff that would seek to, it is my impression, right? This is not information that I gather because it's medical related information. And frankly, that is an employee's kind of sole, that is information that they may choose to share and not be compelled to do so. So, but it would appear that, the vast majority of staff that would be desired to get a vaccine have at least received their first dose. And I think many staff members have already received their second. And then everything that I'm hearing is peak effectiveness for the vaccine process would be 2 weeks post second. So, it would appear that, North Carolina's efforts to try to prioritize teaching staff and educational staff members has gone very well, and those opportunities have been made available. So that is, unless there's questions for me or, that's my initial round of information, would be happy to clarify or add detail to anything.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Great report as always. I want to open it up at this point just to fellow board members with any questions they may have for you. I'll kick off with just a quick question to clarify. I know that on the Strong Schools report matrix, the 6 feet distance is the one thing that's being amended. And I know you said as much space as possible. It seems like the research that most of what I've read says that, wearing the mask, 2 kids, 2 people in general kind of wearing a mask, the chance of spread goes way down regardless of distance. But just curious, are you thinking does that look more like 3 feet, or, is that a more realistic sort of distance or spacing? I'm just curious on that.
So I think the reality of it is there's going to be periods of time, no matter what, where 3 feet is not going to happen. I tend to be one that puts my faith into the research about the masks. Actually, if everything we're hearing is that's the number one component that can prevent spread person to person, regardless of age level. So that is a big one, and we are. It's the challenge, I think, if we think about extrapolating, and we know that the younger bodies in our elementary are much smaller, so it's a little easier to maintain distance. Now that some of our middle schoolers are coming in, let me say that many of them are, my size, or not all. Well, let's put it this way: a handful are my size. But that being said, it's a group of bigger bodies, and I think it would be a challenge. Distancing between the students would be a greater level of challenge within the middle school. All of that really looks at density. And I don't know, obviously, one of the things we would do is give families, if a change were made, we would give families, specifically middle school families, an opportunity to reassess their decision, and that might adjust numbers. But, my rule of thumb would be always trying to maintain 3 feet between students. I don't know that, clearly that might not always be the case, but it would be always the goal.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions, Jennifer or Tiffany, for Principal Howard?
Actually, I had a question.
Yeah.
As far as numbers right now, do you have a rough, and I know it will change if we decide to open up to 4 days a week, but what's the percentage of remote families or students that have chosen to go fully remote for the remainder of the year? And then another question I was thinking, lunches are for middle school. Are they in the classroom? Are they in the gym? Or what's the process with that?
So yeah, so percentages, I'll give you kind of broad brushstroke. So it's trending. Sixth grade tends to be a little bit higher. So meaning in-person participation. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 25-ish percent, 25 to 28% out. Eighth grade tends to be almost an even balance as it currently stands. So about a third on A days, a third on B days, and roughly 1/3 are currently operating fully remote. And all of those numbers might change on a class by class basis. And I think this is one of the bigger challenges that we face. That varies. And part of this is the operation model that we have, where we have move up math, move up reading, and multi-tiers. So students really do have to be, they have to be put in courses that align with the class offerings that they're in. And so we're going to get some variation up and down, what might not be quite that as even a split at some points in time. For example, I was in sixth grade. Well, I covered lunch in sixth grade, actually. So I was in the sixth grade classrooms, and at one class period, just because of the the makeup of students and how it aligned, there were only 5 students in a classroom in one of them, but the other 2 had roughly 10 or 12 in the class. So a little unbalanced. I would assume it will kind of balance out. My guess would be we would wind up somewhere in the neighborhood of 20-ish students per classroom, but I could be slightly off on that one. And it would really depend on the course, the period. In terms of lunch, currently what we're doing is having middle school students eat in their classrooms. We have, just as of Monday of this week, reinstituted daily lunch for grades 2 and 3 at the same time, and then grades 4 and 5. So 2 grade levels in the gymnasium concurrently. We're still making sure the students are with their grade levels. We're staggering students at the tables and trying to distance them as much as possible. I mean, the truth of the matter is they have far more room and space available in the gymnasium, so that's a good thing. One of the challenges for middle school would be we're really talking about 3 grade levels, and I would be uncomfortable putting students at the density required to bring 3 grade levels in at the same time. So Jennifer, what we would do is kind of look at what we're doing. So a couple of proposed ideas would be to take 2 of the 3 grade levels and basically replicate that same process and have 1 grade level kind of rotating. So it wouldn't be just that 1 grade level for the remainder of the year, but have 1 grade level rotating where they would still have their lunch in their classrooms. And that would allow for greater distancing of the other 2 grade levels, but still provide the supervision we would hope for the outlying group of students. And then obviously some of this would just depend on where numbers, if we were to make a change, where numbers would shake out with that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you, Jennifer. Tiffany, go ahead, Tiffany.
Well, if I may, I just want to say truly thank you, Doug, for just your strategic planning, just how you guys have strategized. It's very impressive. Great job, as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug, also, you might take just a minute to, just curious kind of what your overall feel is from teachers, specifically health-wise as it relates to moving to Plan A. I realize obviously the hybrid remote piece is always a challenge and is going to, will continue to be somewhat challenging, but specifically from a health standpoint, just sort of, nothing tangible, but just the overall feel for that. And then the 4 days versus 5 days and sort of, what your thoughts are on that, please.
And then, okay, just writing that down so I don't forget a component here. So the 4 to 5, well, I'll start with the health piece. I think there is a measure of security in having, teachers, those that have so chosen, having vaccines made available, and it provides a measure of personal security. It's interesting. Most of the health-related information that we've seen and heard has been geared specifically towards, and this would be over the course of time, right? Obviously, this is an ever-changing dynamic, but have been geared towards that 10 and under group of students that would, they're less likely to contract the COVID-19. They're less likely to transmit than perhaps older students. And I've really not seen, and let me also say that my cup runneth over a little bit. So I've not been scouting this one incredibly closely, but I've not really seen any data that would that has been presented that would be kind of contrary to that, if you will. So, we really don't know what it would look like, to bring students in, middle school students specifically, at the density that we're talking about, and, managing that. So I think that a certain amount of healthy, wondering what that would mean for the students themselves and, school operation. I have heard a little bit of that. I've heard from a number of parents, just to kind of take it slightly a step further.
Hey, buddy.
The vast majority of parents that I've heard from are.
Do you need anything?
Mrs. Winslow, I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Not at all. The vast majority of parents that I've heard from are in favor of middle school students coming back into the building with more frequency. So opening up in Plan A, that's certainly not universal. I have had parents who have expressed an interest in saying, my goodness gracious, we haven't even hardly been able to come in Plan B, and now we're talking about 4 days and doubling the density, and that felt less secure. And I think that's there's validity to that point as well. So, a bit of a mixed bag. My overall feeling is parents, at least those that I've heard from, and that's a limited number, would want to explore the option of increased density. The board also always retains, depending on the functioning of the school, the right to kind of go into a lesser level of function should health conditions warrant that. The last thing that you had mentioned was the 4 or 5 days a week, and the mandate State Board of Education were very clear that Plan A is a minimum of 4 days, and obviously up to 5. I think that one of the challenges that we face, and I'll speak specifically to Greensboro Academy, is the translation of material for in-person material to the digital format, and then managing students within both the digital, the virtual realm, and in person, is really an arduous process, and it's a very time-consuming process. So while it's the biggest lift. I think that, over the course of this year, we've talked about the two easiest, and I'm talking easy in terms of workload, the two easiest models of operation are all in or all virtual. And hybrid remains that painful in-between place. So I can say that the vast majority of the teachers, actually every teacher that I've spoken with, at least at Greensboro Academy, would be, would strongly advocate for the 4 days of in-person education. I would also say, this is tangential, but I also have the opportunity to work with and oversee one of our NHA sister schools in the Charlotte area. And in speaking with the principal there, she had expressed basically that same sentiment, that the teachers are really struggling to keep their heads above water, and the Wednesday is the one way that that allows for them to manage and plan for for both modalities.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other board member questions for Principal Howler? Doug, just briefly, I had thought about a question, I think, from a parent that came up last board meeting, just briefly on volunteers, the chance or likelihood as we move forward for a parent who perhaps can show that they have received both vaccinations and the 2-week period following that from a volunteer help. I mean, obviously the volunteers, our school has always been heavily dependent and has been incredibly successful in some large part due to the parent volunteers. I know the teachers cherish that as well. So just curious on any updates on that.
So it is an avenue that's available to us. That is absolutely correct. And I think you highlighted a couple of the keys, which would be the parent would have to, or any parent that wanted to, volunteer their time within the building. And you're right, it is one of those things that is part and parcel of Greensboro Academy, and we love it. And the teachers would welcome that. We would have to have verification that both vaccines had in fact been completed, and that there was a 2-week window of time post second vaccine to allow for that. The second part, so once the vaccination piece were taken care of, the second part would be the school actually doing a little bit of a tutorial or an onboarding component just to, meet with parent volunteers before they were to come in the building and go over school operations, the procedures that we had in place for students to uphold their safety and all of those great things. A few steps that need to be taken, but it's something that we will absolutely explore before the end of the year. We did this I guess as point of reference prior to bringing in substitutes at the beginning of this school year. One of the things that we added to that process was in fact an overview of the safety procedures and processes that we had put in place. It is my impression that, for parent volunteers, it would be very similar information. So we have a working template from this.
Very good. Thank you. Tiffany, Jennifer, any other questions for Doug?
No, not at this time.
Okay, great. I'd like to make a motion for our middle school students to return to Plan A instruction 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, starting Monday, April 12th. Obviously keeping the mandatory remote option in place, certainly for families. I think what we've heard and the information we have and the general feel for the school and the leadership and the teachers, certainly I think we can move in that direction. So the motion is for middle school students, Plan A instruction 4 days a week, beginning Monday, April 12th. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Okay, great. Moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. The motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Great information and discussion, Doug. Really appreciate your hard work on the report. I know that there's
Absolutely.
not enough hours in the day for you, and so to pour your time into this and being able to get information out to us, multiple times during the week and during the month. We really appreciate that as always, and to you also, Melissa. So we'll move into the public comment section, the second of our public comment section. I'll open it up. Again, you would just state your name, your relationship to the school, and you would have 3 minutes. So I'll open it up to public comment.
There's a hand raised from Val's iPhone.
Yes, good morning. My name is
Morning.
Valerie Lavoie, and I have a 6th grader. We have opted out to be fully remote for this year. I'm in the medical field, and I personally choose to keep my daughter out of the school system just as precaution. My concern is data for teens. The youngest one, K to 6, even 8th grader, they're not testing. I personally was confronted with my pediatrician that refused to test my daughter because she was under 18 years old. So my concern here is, yes, data shows that kids are not positive, but to my opinion, they're vector. And when we're reopening full board, as Guilford County School are instructing, I have very strong concern about elderly parents that are working that can be contracting that virus. And now we're having a rise of the variant, and we're not tested with the variant because we don't have the tools to adequately test it. So those are just my concern. I'm fully open to the 4 days a week, but as long as Greensboro Academy gives the option for parents that wish to keep their kids remote. And I have to say the teachers are doing an awesome job. It's very, very hard to do remote and in class. But that said, it's greatly appreciated. And, by keeping it remote, we're lessening a little bit the density, if I can make a point. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Val, for sharing your thoughts and concerns. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
This is Kelly O'Day. How are you?
Yes, Kelly, good morning.
Good. I appreciate Val's comments. I kept my daughter home as well. She's a 6th grader at Greensboro Academy. We've been there since kindergarten. And I just want to share her ability to come back to school has been amazing. She really enjoyed being with her classmates. I talked to her about, like what she had to do and the safety protocols. I just had checked in with the teachers, and I can't say enough for the mental health for these kids to have the ability to go back to school for those that can. It really makes a huge difference. So I appreciate, the challenges, and people have to make their decisions, whether to stay home or whether to go. But for us and for my child, for sure, I'm glad that she's able to be with her classmates and in person with the teacher, even though, it is shortening to the end of the year. So thank you for doing that.
Kelly, thank you for those comments. Greatly appreciated and always welcomed. Thank you. Anyone else public comment? Anyone? Okay, haven't heard none. Board member comments. Tiffany, Jennifer, any comments in closing?
Just a big thank you to all the teachers and staff and admin, parents. It's been a challenging year, and thank you for all the efforts.
Well said. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, if no other board member comments, we will adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, April 13th, our regularly scheduled meeting, which we will have. That'll be at 4 p.m. again on Tuesday, April 13th, regularly scheduled board meeting. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend and a great spring break.
Thank you.
Thank you.